Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I'm Liz Sidnor, your host for today, and I'm thrilled to be swapping seats with Katelyn Rossier, the brilliant mind behind mentorDINO and the mentorDINO podcast. Katelyn is an associate and project architect at Smith Group in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, an entrepreneur, coach, and facilitator. Thank you, Katelyn, for being here. I'm honored to speak with you and hear about your journey today.
Thank you so much, Liz, for taking over the podcast for the day.
Yes, thank you. I'm honored. So first, I'll have you introduce yourself, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your career and education?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name's Katelyn Rossier. I am a licensed architect in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, currently working at Smith Group and having loads of fun with mentorDINO on the side. Growing up, I always loved sketching and drawing. My dad owned an art gallery, and I used to take foam core out of the back and just grab different markers he had and then be drawing all day. He'd even frame some of the artwork and try to sell it. And so I was always had pens, markers, pencils in my hand doing different things, and discovered drafting in middle school with the tech classes. So all the woodworking and hand drafting. My mom was a big proponent of calligraphy, so it kind of brought the arts into a little bit more of a structured way to have a profession and not try to go an artist route. And so then I ended up taking all CAD classes in high school and actually learned Revit in high school. So people are pretty blown away that I had Revit experience even before college, and trying to go for my first job and saying I have I had probably 7 years of experience in Revit before even getting my first job. And so I had to always explain that to everybody on, just the luck of the high school I was in. But growing up, things didn't always come easy to me. I struggle a lot with reading and writing. I've always been in kind of those assisted learning type things. My mom thought I even had eye issues because I wasn't reading well. I actually read faster and more accurately upside down than right side up.
Oh, wow.
But what that meant in terms of college is, in the United States, you have to take the SATs. I'm very good at math, but my reading and writing comprehension isn't the strongest. And so it led to a very hard time trying to get into architecture schools because they have a very high caliber. They only let a certain number of professionals in, and there's only a few universities that are accredited. So I didn't have opportunities to go to some other routes because I didn't want to go a route that I knew wasn't accredited. And for me, the local university is Carnegie Mellon, and that price tag when, my parents aren't loaded worth of money and I didn't want to be in mounds of debt, was very hard to not be able to pick a local university. So I had ended up looking at a closer radius. My mom was diagnosed with cancer my senior year of high school, so I definitely wanted to be closer to home, that if something were to happen, I didn't have to wait for a plane, could get in a car and go. So I applied to Virginia Tech, Penn State, Kent State, Ohio State, and to be honest, none of them accepted me until Kent opened up its second round. So, there's enough students that didn't select Kent as their school, and I didn't have to do their summer class, and I got in, and it ended up being the only one I went to. Penn State wanted me to do landscape architecture. And I forget, I applied to Maryland and I forget what they told me to do, but that was also like a weird route. But even going and applying to architecture schools, like they always made it very intimidating. I remember a conversation I had with the dean at Kent State at the time, because I was actually thinking about doing a dual degree of architecture and interior design because I find those professions are so intertwined. And I literally got laughed at as a high school student that's looking to pay you, like pay the university a lot of money to teach me. And later learning, he could have just said, well, you can study architecture, you could probably take some interior classes on the side, but you could go sit for your NCIDQ even though you're an architect. Or, hey, there's schools in Michigan that I have friends that have degrees in both. And so it's frustrating to me when I see deans and professors just trying to scare people away already, and they're not even in their architecture program. Then you get through a program and people already drop out, then you get in the profession and even more people drop out. So it was frustrating to me to see, and I ended up going to Kent because it was the only school that let me in. I wasn't really like thrilled, but that dean also didn't hang around too long, so it was fine. But definitely throughout school, it was always just trying to overcome his thought that I couldn't make it because of a reading SAT score and to prove him wrong. And so I spent most of my time at Kent just kind of proving people wrong that I could do it. I ended up actually being a tour guide at Kent State, so I got to give prospective students tours and, try to get ahead of people who would see somebody like the dean gave for my experience. And did that all the way through my master's, because I did end up staying at Kent for my master's degree. And I always tried to grab the architecture and interior design students. We would see the list of just names, state that they were from, and what profession they were going for. And sometimes they'd have two if they were undecided. Anytime there was an architect or interior designer, even the other tour guides were like, you're taking that person, because they're going to have questions that they couldn't answer, and then just trying to sneak them off into studio so they could see what studio looks like. Upon graduation, so graduated in 2014 with my master's. I know I was definitely ready to just be done and get out into the working world. I was kind of done with the studio late night cultures. And it was still remnants of the 2008 recession. I didn't have a summer internship till I had a bachelor's degree. And then I interned at Perkins Eastman. And then I had a winter internship at a small firm that I think I was employee number 4. It was an architect, interior designer, and 2 other people. And so getting out and just trying to cold call firms, reach out to them via email, just seeing what opportunities, if any, because nothing was listed online. There was no job listing of places you could go check out. And I remember the firms that wouldn't even respond to me. I remember the firms that would hang up on me when I tried calling them, rather than just letting me know, hey, we don't have anything right now, thanks, or send your resume over, but we don't have anything right now. And so I remember that. I remember the firms that really went out of their way to just say, no, we're good right now. And that's all they had to do. And so got my first job at a smaller firm in Pittsburgh, IKM. I only say smaller because I work at Smith Group right now, which is a national company. But even then, they were a really good sized firm. I think they were at maybe 40 people when I started, and we're up to 70 when I left. And so it was a good spot to get my hands dirty. I was on job sites constantly. I was on all local work. I had a point where I could bike to one job site, walk to another, and the third one was on the way home. Like, it was so easy and accessible for me. And I was able to learn a lot there. And a lot is probably even an understatement for how much my career grew while there. I had some pretty unique challenges early on in my career in general. I was on a tough project where the contractor was very sexist. The only person that gave me any respect on the job site was the superintendent. I would bring male interns and they would respect their direction over me. But then there were struggles on the design team side too. The principal was going through cancer at the time and didn't have, the energy to keep track of the project. The project manager was very angry all the time, was very fed up with the firm, and he ended up storming out, quitting one day. The project architect just wanted to design and didn't want to do the details. So he would just design in circles. And me, as a young professional, he's like, oh, you go do these details. And I had never done a new construction building with these details. And he ended up leaving during the project too. So I pretty much got elevated to project manager within the first couple of years of my career. I know I got licensed during that project, but I got licensed within 3 years of graduation. So you can have kind of scope of that was under construction. I just got my license very young. So there's still a lot to learn, and struggled just to get people to come to the job site to help me learn. I had no idea if things were getting built right, trying to teach myself, ask questions. There were structural failures on the project. There was not enough power to the job site. Things were done wrong. There were issues with submittals and things being outdated and not updating everything. So when PLAM gets updated, you should also change the paint swatches that are going with it as well. I learned that because of all the bright colors. But that profession, or that project, I should say, I almost left. And it was a few mentors in the office that would take me out for drinks, and they would just keep telling me, don't worry, you're learning 5 years of experience in one. And I was just so angry at the time. I'm like, this isn't fair. And it wasn't until years after that I understood what they meant. I started seeing other professionals of similar levels as me, or just, starting their career, but maybe just a little bit behind if they haven't finished their exams, and understanding where their thought process was versus my own, because of dealing with a tough project, tough contractor, and the client's office could see the project the whole time, and he was walking and changing things on the fly without telling me. So that one was hard. The next project I was on, I tried to pivot just to be on a team where the team made sense to me and learn from them, which was a great experience to jump into workplace, see what it actually meant to have a contractor that respected you, be on a job site, have the team have your back. And so seeing what architecture could actually do. But I've always had a passion for cancer centers because of my mom, and it had an opportunity to jump on a cancer center project. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I did the master plan, and most of the cancer center ended up leaving during construction. But because of those struggles I had, I learned the trust issues that I started to have. Because people left me on job sites. The PM didn't update the specs like he was supposed to before he left, and assuming those are correct. And so that one, I didn't delegate as much. I didn't delegate early enough. I hindered the team because I had trust issues that they would get it done, and delegating details to a younger professional, because I had that and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was at least delegating a whole building to them. So that project was tough, but we were also 14 people short in our whole firm staffing. So the firm was running really thin, and I just got super burned out. I was exhausted. When they say you look at the threshold of the front door of the office and your stomach sinks, they're not wrong. Like, I would dread getting to the parking lot. I would dread entering the building. I would dread just walking in the door. As soon as I sat at my desk, I was fine. But it was those threshold moments. And so seeing that and just understanding, like, oh, I'm beyond burned out. And that's the problem with burnout, is you don't really realize you're starting to get to it until you're already pretty deep into it. And so I had an opportunity. I actually had a recruiter reach out to me to go work for a contractor that was kind of contractor design firm-esque. And so they're two separate companies, but they kind of work under one umbrella. And it was an opportunity where they're like, hey, you don't have to do CA because, well, the contractor side will do it. And at the time I had 5 projects under construction. Oh, wow. And then they were going to give me 5% or a 50% pay bump. And I'm like, well, I'm a broke architect. Like, I'm exhausted. Yes. Like, let's go. And absolutely hated it. And I learned that money is not everything, especially for architects, designers, and professionals within the arts type of community. It's really finding what you need and what you want. And, money's part of it. We can't be broke. But sometimes just a big jump in pay isn't always what you need. And to be honest, I was bored. So I went from that overwork burnout to boredom and didn't have any opportunities to do anything. I was disrespected. I remember their setup, they kind of had the stamping architect that, stamps every drawing, has a license in every state. And I remember a day a contractor came in to go try to find him because this guy just sits in his office all day QCing drawings. That's all he did. And was all upset that he wasn't in his office to ask a question. And he said, "Where's an architect when you need one?" And another male architect that's licensed in the office stood up and said, "Yeah, I don't know where one could be." And then I stood up and said, "I'm just a girl. What could I do for you?" And then the guy just stormed off. And I'm like, after that moment, I was like, yeah, I'm done here. Like there's no way for me to grow as a young female in this office. And I ended up hiring a career coach. It was very expensive. And the only way I was able to afford it was because I got that big pay bump. And that helped me kind of put myself out there and understand I am good enough. And she even was pushing me to create stuff like mentorDINO. But I had severe imposter syndrome that I didn't know what I was doing. But she gave me the opportunity to learn the power of connections and networking, and ended up having a lunch with one of the principals at the Pittsburgh office of Smith Group to actually learn about Smith Group and Stantec at the same time because she had just left there, and trying to find a big firm that I could start to carve my own path in case I want to side swipe, shift, pivot, whatever you want to call it, and figure out my career. And ended up starting at Smith Group February 2020. And was so glad I didn't get laid off because we were only in the office for a month before everybody went home.
Oh my gosh.
And going straight working from home and working with people in all different offices, large firm. It would have been a great time to start my own side business, but COVID, when it started, was so weird. We were just trying to navigate and figure out what's going on. You couldn't see people. So just kind of taking that time to step back, just, okay, I wanted to have coffee chats with somebody new every other week. I didn't care what office they were in. I didn't care what level they were in. And it was just talking to people. I want to be friends with principals. I want to be friends with project managers. I want to know resources all around the country. So I did that through COVID and been there ever since, having fun, doing some higher ed and a little bit of healthcare work. And in January 2023, mentorDINO finally launched. And so I actually ended up working on it the back half of 2022. I got married at the end of October 2022, and then just went into doing recordings and teaching, seeing the gaps in the industry between my own experience and seeing it in the really small firms, the medium firms that still don't have resources, and even seeing gaps in the large firms that they'll argue they have infinite resources and they're there for you, but there's still a need in large firms as well to help and grow their staff. But there's really no professional development training and teaching professionals around the country. Even when you try to look it up on LinkedIn, for those within an architecture firm, I believe I only found 13 people. And actually had somebody that's used to looking and searching for people on LinkedIn give me that number. And so it was like, there's 13 people nationwide doing what I would love to do. There's no way a firm's going to hire somebody, because Pittsburgh's a small community. We don't tend to have all the large offices, or even if a big firm's here, it's not the biggest office. And I was trying to figure out how to help the whole industry. I was tired of seeing my friends getting burned out, myself included, people having trust issues, delegation issues, teaching and mentoring, people just not having time to help everybody figure out where they're going along the way. So mentorDINO started just recorded courses. I shared ARE stories. I think I hit over 85 and started slowing down on that. It was hard to get people to answer questionnaires. Launched a podcast towards the end of 2023, which was fantastic to start to talk to people, and then launch the mentorDINO network, which is a community-based learning, because I found people just want to have conversations and have those honest, hard times. I think you and I have even joked it's like architherapy sometimes that we need
Yes.
to just let it out, have a bad day. But hey, if you're struggling with a design and just need another person's eye on it to give an opinion or celebrate something, but also a way to put training somewhere between gathering resources, finding out from reps and manufacturers and the trades what design teams keep messing up. Like, we just need to go ask the question, compile everything, and go. And we could improve so much by just doing some more work. And so that's what I'm trying to do with mentorDINO, is take those steps to start infilling some gaps. I know the gaps are giant, and I don't know if I can fill all of them, but I can at least take some steps forward to try to help. So,
yes.
And that takes us to today. It's very long-winded, but I feel like there's a lot to my story.
There is. And you've experienced so much, I think, from out of school until now. And the fact that you're taking that experience, the good and the bad, and giving back, I think is really commendable. So I want to take a step back and really ask you, why did you want to be on the other side of the podcast today? What was the main motivator for that?
So I've been on other podcasts. I think I was on 4 since I started mentorDINO, and even doing my own when I call it creeping on my guests before a podcast, just trying to dive into their firm's website or their own professional website, LinkedIn, and just trying to come up with questions, and having the interviews that people ask me questions. Nobody's going to put on, I failed a lot early in my career, or I have trust issues. You will have to gain trust with me. Like, nobody's going to know that. And so some of the big motivators to why I started mentorDINO are the things that nobody really is going to highlight on LinkedIn or in the profession. You may get hints of it through my LinkedIn posts, but they're not in a spot that somebody can just quickly search, because I don't really list all my mistakes and challenges and bad factors of me on the website. And I don't want to mean harm to anybody either. That was my experience, and I learned a lot, and I am who I am today because of it. I am loving everything with mentorDINO, and if I didn't have those challenges early in my career, I don't think I'd be here today. So being on the other side of the podcast is a way to kind of give you a little insight into the reason behind mentorDINO, why I'm so passionate about it, why it started, where it came from, and what I'm trying to do to help the profession as a whole.
And so you've touched upon it a little bit already, and I think kind of in the essence of being unfiltered and vulnerable and sharing your story, you touched upon burnout a little bit. But I think you mentioned before you've experienced 3 types of burnout. And so can you explain what those 3 types are and your experience within those?
Yeah, so there are 3 types of burnout. Everybody thinks of the overworked burnout, we'll call it. So it's the physically, emotionally exhausted. That's the I don't want to cross the threshold. You work harder for fractional success. And then it starts to become a deterrent to your health and your personal life. I've lost relationships because of architecture and burnout and pushing myself too hard. I actually started having health problems whenever I was overworked burnout, which was at that first firm. And even talking to my mom and just saying, hey, I'm having these issues. And she's like, that's not okay. You need to go see a doctor. But taking time to go see a doctor when a firm wants your butt in a seat to prove that you're there, and not give you that flexibility. Like nowadays, like if I'm not feeling well, I can work from home and I don't feel like I'm going to be judged. Whereas pre-COVID, it's you better show up, you better be on time, because we're going to check the sign-in sheet to make sure you're here. If you're not sitting at your desk, you're not being productive. And so all that and just trying to keep up with a pace that you couldn't handle. Like I said, we were 14 people short. So it wasn't just my project team. The whole office was short staffed and we had a lot of big projects going. So it's trying to keep up with a pace that's unsustainable is also part of that overwork burnout. The second type of burnout is kind of the complete opposite. I like to call it the bored burnout. So you start to feel detached. That happens when there's a lack of challenging work, which is why, especially in architecture, you're always trying to grow and learn and expand to kind of avoid the boredom burnout. And you're just not stimulated by work. Like it doesn't do anything for you. If you're just sitting there moving walls around all day and that's all you do every day, for most people, that's going to start leading you down a bored cycle because you're just not being fulfilled. And you start to lose that passion and that drive. And I actually started having that at the contractor company because I had nothing to do. To be honest, I did the first Pittsburgh Equity and Architecture report all during those work hours because I had nothing else. They would give everybody else the work because I was their client. They have draftsmen. So I was asking the draftsman, give me some red lines so I can at least make it to the 8 hours I had to sit at the desk all day. And then they were wondering why I left every day on time. I'm like, well, I have nothing to do. Right. And so me realizing I'm not good at being bored, but understanding burnout enough that was coming. And I didn't let it get to the extreme because there's 5 levels of burnout. There's kind of like that honeymoon phase where, you're excited about a new project and then you start having some stress, which stress is fine. But then that stress becomes chronic and starts to lead to burnout as a whole, and then habitual burnout, which just becomes repeatable and you can't physically get out of it. And it's a lot harder. And then you're more prone to fall back into burnout a lot quicker. The third one is helplessness. And that one's a little bit harder to define. And it's really feeling helpless when you face decisions. There's nothing you can do. Your passion is sunk. You stop trying. There's not enough structure, direction, and guidance along the way. So that can also be part of burnout that people mix with the boredom one. Whereas the boredom ones, you're there, but maybe you just don't have projects coming in to do things. And the helplessness is just, there's nothing you can do to get by. There's no control. Or if you drop leadership positions and then all of a sudden you're not guiding a team anymore, or you don't have those responsibilities, that can also lead to helplessness. And, when you're overworked, you're like, have somebody else run the project. I'll just pick up little red lines. I'll be fine. And you need that as a break. But for those professionals that really like striving, being in front of the client, feeling fulfilled by their projects, if you're just doing red lines and you're used to that client side, it'll start to lead to that feeling of helplessness. So sometimes it's not fully pulling back on everything, but understanding there can be breaks. And it's like, hey, if I can just pick up red lines for a week, that gives me enough to decompress, relax a bit, but then I'm going to be ready for the next project or take on the next challenge. So that's kind of the 3 types of burnout that I've experienced in different ways, shapes, and forms, and feel like everybody should just understand burnout more so then they can hopefully find it in others. As I said, it's hard to tell you're even burned out or starting to get there until you're more habitually burned out. And then it feels like you got hit by a semi truck. And by that point, it's too late to fix it. I was determined the only way I can fix that overwork burnout was to leave the firm I was with. And I feel if I had that support or somebody else reaching out to me earlier, I don't think I would have gone to that point. And I would have stayed there longer, or at least finished out the cancer center before trying out a new firm to get different experience. So I feel like if everybody knows a little bit more about burnout, they can start to reach out to their friends in the office and say, hey, I'm worried about you. Let's go get some lunch. How can I help? What do you need? Take care of yourself. Force people to take PTO. I've talked to a number of people that I'm like, you're going to take next Friday off. You're going to go ask for the PTO. You have it. Go do it. I don't want you to log onto your computer. I want you to go be outside and go do something you love. for one day, and then you'll have the whole rest of the weekend, but I don't want you to open up your laptop that weekend either. And sometimes doing those early enough can help catch burnout earlier and start a conversation.
Yes.
So it's a little bit about my experience with it, but everybody's is so unique, which is the hard part about burnout, is you really have to have those individual conversations to figure out what's going on with somebody.
And I think being really just honest with yourself too, right? That the signs that you're experiencing is just taking note of that and thinking, okay, my body is telling me something and I need to listen to it and address it in some way. But yeah, that was very helpful.
Like I know we even talked about on your episode how you've now switched more over to matcha rather than chugging espresso and running into the office. And it's even just some little shifts like that that can really do wonders for somebody that's, struggling and stressed out. Like, take a step back.
Yeah, totally. And it's almost annoying that the advice that you hear, you're like, oh, this actually works. Drinking less coffee, exercising, like, oh, this actually does what it's supposed to do. But yes, thank you for sharing that. And, there's this idea that people who have been through a lot are often the ones that want to help others the most. And when I first heard your story, I thought this immediately. You've experienced so many hardships in your career. And like I said before, giving back is just really commendable. And so I can see why you started mentorDINO, but could you really, from your perspective, share like what's the core why of why you started mentorDINO?
The why behind it, it's more just trying to help. So many professionals will acknowledge the gaps in the profession, will acknowledge that architecture school doesn't teach students nowadays. Even when I graduated, they didn't teach me exactly what I would be doing. And expecting firms to do it all, and firms are stressed and running thin, that they don't have time to do it. For anybody listening, take a look at your work calendar this week. How many back-to-back meetings do you have? Do you have any time in your day to even teach? Are you carving time to teach people? And when you're not teaching, you put people on a long leash and assume they're figuring it out. But then there's young professionals just trying to prove themselves, and oftentimes have a hard time admitting they don't know what they're doing, or they think they're doing it right, but there's the whole factor of you don't know what you don't know. And so if you don't realize you're doing it wrong and you think you're doing it right, and the senior professional is not taking the time to go through the drawings, mark it up right, have time to QA the set before it goes out, and just assuming people go down that rabbit hole to really figure it out, can really be damaging to the profession. And I think the profession itself has started to just have so much devalue because the contractor's just getting bad sets of drawings. The architects don't know how to build anything anymore. The people on site just don't have that knowledge base and get the details going. And also the professional development side. People don't know how to delegate. There's actually levels of delegation, and understanding if you're at level 0 of delegation, you're not actually delegating at all. And you may think, oh, I'm delegating. Why am I not saving time in my day? And it's because you're not delegating at a high enough level yet, because you haven't built that trust with that professional. And when I learned about the levels of delegation in relation to trust, then I understood the issues I was having. So I trick myself into trusting people faster. And I know how to do that based on the way I can delegate tasks. So I can understand where that leash can go and when they need to get pulled back. And I've even had great professionals. I had a young professional, I gave her a ceiling detail to do of axiom trim. And for any seasoned architect, we know what axiom trim is. We know what the detail is. And she drew it perfectly. And at the end, I was like, great, this all looks perfect. I don't even have any red lines. And she's like, fantastic. What did I just draw? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't even know what this is. And thankfully, I could go find some in the office and show it to her installed, and then go online and show the videos on how everything's coming together, what it's for, what it looks like, why we do it in different situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize I needed to go to that level. And didn't realize the person wasn't also going to just go look it up themselves. It was just,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you had me draw the detail, you do this and done. And she could have just said, great, and move on to the next task. But she at least advocated for herself to make sure she understood what she drew and why she drew it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not enough of that training, and people don't take the time to do it because as soon as it looks great, they just want to move on. But if it has a lot of red marks, they want to dive into it. So it's all of that and teaching people how to teach too, because it's all a chicken before the egg thing. Like, you need to have the technical detail knowledge. You need to know how to teach, mentor, coach. Not everybody's a mentor, but you at least need to teach people on your teams how to draft and do things. So it's one thing if you don't want to coach somebody up, but you got to make sure your drawings are done right. And if people don't know they're not doing it right, then it's those senior professionals that end up working all the late hours because they feel they don't have time to teach. It'll be faster for them to just do it. Whereas if they laid a little bit better of a foundation to start, they could potentially get some time back in their day too. Because I just see really the more senior architects and principals actually burning out more than the younger professionals because they feel they have to constantly be working or even keeping up with their own schedule because they don't build in time to actually get their stuff done. So the why behind mentorDINO is just all those little lessons I learned along the way and seeing other people make those mistakes when they really don't need to. If there's a little bit more foundation work to start, if I could teach somebody in the first 3 years of their career how to delegate properly, how to build trust, not only with their team, but with their clients, how you can actually do a lot of business development when you do really well on projects and get things delivered on time and done thoroughly. You're there for the client in a pinch. Those things can really add up. And if you learn that early in your career rather than waiting to your senior professional, just imagine where the profession could be. If I could teach all the young professionals right now all of those things and ownership of their work now, in a decade from now, we're going to have a lot of really strong leaders. And for those in leadership roles, it's not hard to start and to start somewhere to working on your career. But it's that why. It's if I start now and I take baby steps and I can slowly help people around the country, no matter if they're a solo entrepreneur, a small firm, large firm, anybody type person, where will the profession be in 5 years?
So we've heard a bit about the why behind mentorDINO. I'm really curious about the how. How did you get started? What did you start with first? And how did you implement all of these big ideas that you had?
Yeah, so the first part I started with was actually recording professional development training. Beyond actually doing research, I was doing research over the summer and everything, and what I wanted to teach, what was important for young professionals, what do I often try to teach, and starting out with young professionals. And I even did some Revit videos as well. I really don't like doing Revit videos. They're not fun, and Revit's really expensive too. But the professional development side's where my passion is, where I can speak to my experiences to help them without sounding too negative about the profession, but saying, just do these baby steps, or how to receive delegated work, how to communicate back. For the number of times I was told, hey, this needs to be done ASAP. ASAP is not a deadline. Tell them when you need it. Do you need it by 4 p.m. today, or can it be done tomorrow? Because you need to tell them the expectation, because if not, you cannot be upset when they thought ASAP was by the end of the week. Or if there's issues between two project managers that just don't talk to each other and they both have a deadline the same day, and it's like, I can't do both. I can do one. Can one be moved to the next day? Or do you need somebody else to do it rather than killing yourself over it and then it being inaccurate, incomplete? You don't have time to check your work. Or just teaching people, don't draft 3 pages of interior elevations. Draft 4. Just 4 views. And then go get feedback. So then the senior architect's not killing themselves going through pages and pages of work, and they just, okay, here's these 4, get the comments, okay, continue. When you finish the page, get a review again before you go finish all the other ones. So it's teaching people how to work through stuff so then they can get the feedback that they actually want and deserve, but it's in manageable chunks that nobody feels overwhelmed and daunted trying to check off everything. So started out there, and before they were released, I was going through the process of making an LLC and had to do a name change. So I started blogging during that tough project to start my career and called it Mentor Architect, and realized going for an LLC, because I had the word architect in the name, that I'd have to go for a professional LLC or a PLLC for the state of Pennsylvania, and talked to a couple friends because architecture firms, they have to be a PLLC in Pennsylvania or a corporation. And they're like, with the costs that they have to do every year to be a PLLC, it's not worth it. So they recommended I do a rebrand. And I like the word mentor part of it and trying to come up with a catchy other name, and realizing why so many architecture firms use acronyms for their business name or just their name is because so many names are taken already. And so it took me a while of just brain dumping, trying to use even AI to like come up with different things. And I ended up coming up with this one on my own. And I've actually gone back to try to figure out like how I got to the dino part. And it's one of those things where like you were just writing something and then the next sentence down was mentorDINO, and there's no like way for me to see how my brain connected it. It's a lot like sketching out ideas. And the DINO part stands for Designers Innovating New Opportunities. So I can add mentoring designers innovating new opportunities, pulling it all together. And as soon as I had Dino written down, I started sketching a little dinosaur. I actually drew cartoons when I was growing up, and had little comics I made. And so the dinosaur kind of connected it back to that drawing side whenever I first started, and created a fun side. I definitely pulled out trace paper to give him hats and stuff like off the bat. But when somebody works with me, they know I like to use emojis and GIFs and memes, no matter if it's challenging times or fun times or if somebody's tired. I always try to make people smile and laugh and have fun, because I know there are times when it's just not fun. And when you can laugh on a project team, no matter how hard it can be a game changer to your mental health, the person you go home to your family, and the person you are with the team, and growing that trust together. And so the dinosaur side is kind of that fun side I try to have, and have fun with him. So it's not just the word mentorDINO all the time. So I'm sorry if everybody gets tired of seeing the dinosaur everywhere, but it's better than seeing my face everywhere. So, but yeah, so that was kind of the initial steps, and just kind of letting people know who I am. I started the ARE series. I ran a panel discussion at Smith Group where 3 people gave their recent ARE experiences to people who are studying, and saw how different their story was from even me. And I'm like, oh, everybody has a very unique story, different challenges. So I'm like, let me see if people answer a questionnaire. When I first blogged, having guest bloggers was painful. So trying to send out questionnaires just to have people share their story. And I was so surprised on the people that gave their stories, the amount of failures people did. I know I failed 2 exams, and not that I was ashamed by that, but I definitely didn't like flaunt it. And I have people that failed 10, 11, 12, 14 exams and told me their story and was willing to put it out on the internet. And some of these stories, I cried. When you go through the process of going through the AREs, you understand the challenges. Even for those that never failed an exam, they still know what that's like to get through the process. And even if you just failed 1 exam, you know the gut punch that is. And then when you see 10, 12, and the person didn't give up, I more admire those professionals, not to put anybody above one another, but they went through some challenging times and really stuck to themselves and were able to get through it. Unfortunately, a lot of people thought that I was teaching the AREs. I found that as a problem. And I was about at a 50% return rate on people actually getting me their stories. So even though I've shared over 85, there's another 85, 90 professionals that said they'd give me their story and just never followed through. And some people, once I gave them the questionnaire, they said they weren't comfortable sharing the information, which is fine. But between it being difficult to get people to answer it and not wanting to be identified as an ARE person, I kind of wanted to be that you're licensed, now what resource, or you're growing in your career, you're taking on team leadership or even leadership in your firm. That's kind of where I wanted mentorDINO to live. And that's where I have the most fun in. So if somebody sends me an ARE story, I'll release it. I've compiled everything into an ebook. I've got to add the rest in there. But I added workshops to start to work with people one-on-one. After going to the Women's Leadership Summit in Boston, so many people were excited about what mentorDINO is and what it wants to do and help. But it's really hard to sell to firms. We don't make the profits that we should. And so money is tight. And a lot of people don't care about professional development in terms of training their staff. They think their staff can just figure it out on their own, or maybe they'll do a little workshop, but that workshop's done by professionals that have no idea what the AEC industry is. So I released workshops. I gave a great workshop on communication, bringing together the local CSI and Young Architects Forum of Pittsburgh together. I love bringing together two different groups so then they can expand their network, but talk about communication in drawings from the specification side. And it's been fun and fantastic, but definitely hard for firms to move forward. So I still offer that as an option. But finding people care a little bit more about the details and getting their job done in a day, but trying to trick people into learning professional development as well. And so I launched the mentorDINO network to do that. And I am pulling together on that side, asking those manufacturers and trades, what do design teams keep messing up? What are you seeing in the field? You're putting in that same product over and over and over again on 10 different projects at one time, whereas architects have to learn one project at a time. Theoretically, it could be multiple. And so it's, how can I learn by the people who are constantly seeing the issues, and then put together, what do you need to draw for them to bid it properly and install it? And maybe you don't need to draw 20 details. Maybe you just need 2. But what do you know for what they're bidding? Like, I sit next to an electrical engineer that's bidding projects all the time. And I'm not going to lie, I always find it hilarious to see the projects that go out, what firms are doing them, and take a peek at their drawing quality. But he has struggles on bids, and he's like, they're not even telling me this information. And I'm like, well, yeah, if I could create a QA list on everything you need so it could be properly bid, then what better bids will you get back on bid day? What better contractors will you be able to have whenever your selection is a lot tighter of a window, and to make sure you got your scope covered? And so that was a way for me to kind of start building that database. But having my professional development courses already in there, I have a career coaching worksheet. So people don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a career coach when they just sometimes need a little help. But have those chats. And I know we have our first coffee chat tomorrow, seeing what everybody in the community wants to talk about. But I want to have a series on what it's like to be a parent in architecture. I want to grab people that are in different backgrounds, different stages of parenthood. Let's come in and talk about it. So then if you're looking to become a parent, or just want somebody else to talk to, or see what struggles other people are having trying to balance their career and parenthood and life, then let's talk about it, because we're all whole oneselves. And I just so happen we'll have technical details for you, other resources. So it's trying to be that one-stop shop to help people. We'll see if I have a small burnout course coming up. I'm debating on that. I may just do a what is burnout course.
Mm-hmm.
And then have people come in, and if they're struggling, let's connect you with people that can help. Because like I said, everybody's burnout is so different and everybody's situation is so different. You can't really create a recorded course on it. At that point, I gotta like one-on-one coach somebody through it, or give them advice along the way, or connect them with other people that had similar struggles, so then they can get that better coaching and mentoring that they need. So a lot of big plans, and trying to even get into manufacturing plants to show people what mock-ups look like, how things get installed, and put it all together into one spot for people. So that's the latest development. And I even skipped over the podcast starting at the end of 2022, but we talked about it so much. So that one I have a lot more fun, I think, than the ARE stories. Just because I actually get to talk to somebody for an hour and learn a little bit about their career, learn about that community. I've met people all over the country. I should try to collect like all 50 states or something, because they've just been so much fun to learn from everybody, and everybody has such great advice. I learn something from every interview that I do. So, but yeah, that's a little bit on the growth of mentorDINO so far. I'm putting together like detailed spreadsheets in my evenings on how to come together, and hopefully it makes me a better architect, because there's still a lot I gotta know. I'm no expert in everything, and you'll never be an expert in everything, but I can go find the experts and get the information that we need and get it in a succinct format so people can work faster and know those experts to reach out to when they have a question. I can do that for people. So
absolutely. Yeah. And it's so impressive that you already have so many components to mentorDINO. You have the network, the podcast, the one-on-one services you offer, either for firms or for individuals. So there really is something for everyone. And the fact that you also focus on affordability, I think, is super important and really awesome. So yeah, just excited for you and for what's ahead, because you've already done so much and accomplished so much.
Yeah, trying to keep it as accessible to as many people as I can. Well, it costs money to run the podcast. It costs money to run websites or even host this platform. Like the community side, it's a whole separate app. So there's no going to Facebook. There's no going to Instagram. It's a whole separate thing. So if nobody wants to be on Facebook, they don't have to. But it costs some money to do that, and costs time and effort to get around to places to help. So hopefully I have it at a good spot where people can see how much they're going to get out of it for the price I'm trying to keep it at, as much as I can. So, and the podcast is like an easy, free way for anybody to hear stories, because you never know when somebody wants to pivot their career or they're struggling with something. Any way I can help, and really just trying to do the baby steps to figure out what somebody needs, is really where the podcast comes in, to tell those stories. Or, if you are hitting challenging times, you mess up something, you're not alone. There are other people that have messed up. There's times people are broke. There are challenges at any person's career, or they get laid off. And that's another challenge and kind of gut punch to somebody when, you thought you had a job and you could do all these things, and now you're panicked just to try to make sure you could pay the bills. So, or the scariness of entrepreneurship. I know when I started this journey, I was very scared, and I am definitely taking the route of kind of holding two jobs at the same time. But talking professionals like yourself that kind of jumped out into entrepreneurship, and knowing that, okay, the scary gut feeling I feel sometimes with mentorDINO, I'm not alone.
No, definitely not.
So yeah, but I haven't completely like jumped ship. I still enjoy my architecture side for now. I do have a feeling mentorDINO will probably take over at some point if it takes off. But also got to, keep an eye on it, see where it goes, and make sure I don't get burned out myself. I always try to ask other people to make sure I'm okay. But making sure if I'm not feeling well, I can take a break. And that's the hard part when you're a solo person doing something, whereas when you're part of a big firm, if if you're sick, you need to take a break, you can do that and people can pick up the slack. But when you're the only one doing it, there's that added pressure that, I'm not a solo architect right now, but, trying to get those services done. But then all of a sudden, like a sick kid's at home or you're not feeling well, like I'm just getting over COVID because that's still around. And it's like, okay, I needed to take like 3 days off and like barely get by on my architecture work and then go sleep. It's important for me to, be able to do that with mentorDINO, even give myself that grace.
Absolutely. Well, Katelyn, I could continue to do this podcast 10 more times because I know you have so much to share and I really love just hearing your story. So sadly, to close, do you have any advice for young professionals just starting their careers?
The biggest advice I would give somebody is understand the concept of you don't know what you don't know. And it can be really hard as a young professional, just, trying to prove yourself in the office, understanding when to ask questions, when to advocate for yourself, understanding that if you're struggling in an office, go talk to somebody else, build that network up, because if it's your first office, you don't know what other offices are like. You may just think, the concept of it's not all, the grass isn't always greener somewhere else. It's just a different shade of green. I partially agree with that, unless it's the extremes. But when you start out, just ask a lot of questions. Get to know the reason why behind something's done a certain way, or even if you drew something and didn't know what it was, ask about it. If there's an acronym that was said in a meeting, write down the acronym and either ask the question to the team or Google it and see what comes up, because you don't know what you don't know yet, but you'll start to learn what you don't know as you see it. But if you can acknowledge it and figure out the right way to learn it properly, then you can grow in your career. But I also understand there's also professional development side and advocating for yourself. So probably my other piece of advice is build up that network and that community for yourself. Professional organizations are a great way to do that. But it's another component of the community I started. Seeing all the people I interview on podcasts, people are willing to talk to me for an hour. And now I feel like I have a professional network across the country that I can reach out to with questions. If I'm struggling with something or an idea, whether it's architecture related or mentorDINO related. And it wasn't until I started mentorDINO and started building up that network, building up LinkedIn, getting on there, seeing what people are posting and talking about. It's not just a job board. Really seeing and building that network has built so much behind what I'm doing. And the resources I have are now infinite and are just getting bigger. So I wish I had started building up my network beyond just my firm's walls a lot sooner, because you never know when you need help and you never know where people will end up. You never know when somebody goes to the owner side or has their own project they want you to do. So it's those connections and relationships that are really the foundation, and they grow you as much as you learning the technical side of architecture. So you don't know what you don't know, and build up your network would probably be the top two things I would give somebody.
Absolutely. And really, mentorDINO is a whole platform for advice. And so I encourage everyone listening to take that up and to really get involved with mentorDINO as well.
Yeah. If I don't have advice for you, I will go find somebody that can help you. I am determined to help everybody.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Katelyn, for sharing your story. And I know others will be extremely inspired by you, your tenacity, and your vision. So thank you so much.
And thanks, Liz, for taking the time to take over the podcast for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the little takeover and switcheroo that we did.
Yes, thank you. It was an honor.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.